So this is going to be a little bit of a fun one. We got somebody saying the top 5 black men of all time. Let's look at his list, and I'm going to give you my official top 5 black men of all time. But really, I'm going to put a twist to it. Basically, the top 5 influential American black men of all time, and that's basically what I'm going to kind of write on. So right here's his list.
These are the top 5 black men of all time. We starting off strong with Malcolm X. Malcolm X stood on business. I'm choosing Malcolm X over Martin Luther King. By the end of Martin Luther King's life, he was on Malcolm X's side, basically. Number 2, Joe Louis. Joe Louis was the first black world heavyweight champion in boxing, right? Joe Louis used to beat the shit out of all them fucking white boys and then go fuck they white girls. Number 3, Mike Tyson. We've seen Mike at the tops, his lows. Now we see him as just a gentle, positive figure, but will still fuck you up. Number 4, Snoop Dogg. What hasn't Snoop done? Rapper, actor, talk show host, a little league football coach, wrestler. He has done almost everything that a little black boy wants to do. The nigga beat a murder charge. Number 5, LeBron James. These are the...
So his top 5 was Malcolm X, if I remember correctly, Malcolm X, Joe Louis. It wasn't in particular order. Malcolm X, Joe Louis, Mike Tyson, Snoop Dogg, and LeBron James. Now, because I made my list, but let me give you some honorable mentions before I give you my list. So with his list, I don't mind him putting Malcolm X in there, obviously. I disagree with LeBron James. I disagree with Snoop Dogg. Joe Louis, I kind of understand, but nah, that wouldn't be me. And then I do not agree with Mike Tyson, even though you know what? He might be honorable mention, in my opinion. You know what I mean? I don't think there's a particular right order, but that I understand why he will put Malcolm X in there. LeBron, I don't know. Definitely top 20 or top 10, maybe. But look, the honorable mentions, when we talk about honorable mentions, because I want to go under top 5 influential black men of all time. And somebody, you see the comment up top, Jack Johnson. So Jack Johnson is in my top 5 because technically he was the first black heavyweight champion. So I'll get into him later. But let me show you I'll give you some honorable mentions, right? So, because I got my list right here. I got a lot of names here. So we got, in my honorable mentions, not my top 5, but honorable mentions, Nat Turner, okay? O.J. Simpson, right? Ike Turner. Many people believe him to be the true king of rock and roll. Ike Turner, a man who was very mischaracterized, and I believe Tina Turner, especially when that movie came out, What's Love Got to Do with It, that did damage to his legacy. And I think that was very calculated because many people believe Ike Turner to be the true king of rock and roll. It's definitely not Elvis. Definitely not Elvis. That's nonsense. Whoever, I don't know how they were able to peddle that. Even though racism was very, very right, I still don't understand how people are still running with this in 2023. Because the true king of rock and roll is either is Little Richard, really, or Chuck Berry. But, so that's definitely under the most influential, because without these guys, Muddy Waters, all these people, without those people, there would be no rock and roll. And most of the people in rock and roll are very cognizant of that, but they're still peddling that. I'm talking about the actual musicians. They know that. I'm talking about of all races, but they're still peddling that Elvis is the king of rock. And the way Ike Turner was disparaged by the end of his life, I think that was calculated. And I believe Tina Turner did no favors in that end. But anyway, that's a whole nother issue. That's a whole nother issue. Who else? Oh, so I left off a lot of black inventors like George Washington Carver. So because there's no black inventors in my thing, because there's a lot of people I could put. I forgot the guy that created the traffic lights. I think it's like George Wallace or something. I think I'm messing up his name. And but George Washington Carver, he was originally my top 5, but I decided to leave the inventors because there's a lot of inventors, good and bad actually, that black people have created that has been very influential. Like I'm talking about very influential. Those would be like my honorable, like Nat Turner. When I say, because when we talk about, he was very influential in terms of they still don't even really want to talk about the story. So much so when Nate Parker was about to drop the movie of it, they derailed the launch of the movie by putting those fake accusation charges on him. That's how you know that the story of that is something that they don't really like to talk about. But it's very important that this is very important part of when we talk about Black Power movement. This is very important story to mention about the rebellions, because that also connects, okay, what other successful rebellions were there in the world where Black people fought back? Then you look at the Haitian Revolution. You know, people don't really like to put these things together. That's why they kind of stop. They don't really like talking about the story of Nat Turner. So who else could I put an honorable mention? So I said Chuck Berry. I said Ike Turner. So before I get into my top 5, oh yeah, also people going to be mad when I say Muhammad Ali. I didn't have him in my top 5, but I had him as honorable mention. But obviously, pretty straightforward why Muhammad Ali. And I wouldn't have mine if somebody put him in the top 5. I'll say, oh, and another fighter. I think Floyd Mayweather. Oh yeah. And then you got Michael Jordan. So when you look at the athletes, the influential Black athletes in America, not worldwide, I'm talking about in America, those guys would obviously make it. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, very influential. But nevertheless, this is my top 5. So you already see it here. Somebody said it, Jack Johnson, because technically he was the first Black heavyweight champion. And I'm talking about this guy was popular, made his rise. I'm talking about early 1910s. It's either early 1900s or early 1910s, and he was so influential in terms of being the first. Technically, he was being the first Black heavyweight champion. He was the first Black champion in terms of they never had the Black fighters fighting any of the white fighters. So when they finally got it together, Jack Johnson, he was one of the first ish talkers, and once the fight happened, basically he dominated so bad, it was just like they said he was just playing with him, until he knocked him out in the last round. But basically, he was just toying with him. And his victory was so profound, was so much so that in America, once news spread about Jack Johnson's victory, Black men were getting lynched across the country. That's how profound that victory is. Do you understand how that, like, on white people's resume, that's like an L for somebody to win a sports and because their image of that is destroyed when their top prize fighter was just dismantled by a Black man that they were trying to keep out systematically, so much so they were so mad that he got lynched. You know, that's that's an L on your resume, right? So yeah. And then on top of that, when people talk about, you know, sex trafficking laws, basically all the pimping laws and all that stuff, that was because of Jack Johnson. You know why? Because he had all these white hoes that he would be parading, traveling with. He had like literally a harem of white hoes that he would literally parade. And this is during the time. This is why I have him in my top 5, because he was doing it at a time when you could get lynched for doing that. He literally could have gotten killed for doing shit. Like you couldn't do that shit in the 1900s, 1910s. Like that was normal now. Like during that time, you couldn't do that. So Muhammad Ali said himself, he said, that dude was crazier than me because there's no way I'll do something like that. That's out of Muhammad Ali's voice. So, and his kind of braggadocious style of talking, his charisma, without Jack Johnson, there would be no Joe Louis, there'll be no Muhammad Ali, there'll be no Floyd Mayweather. You know what I'm saying? Without no Mike Tyson, without Jack Johnson, he was very influential on that end. So that'll be number 5. Number 4, and this is not in particular order in value, I'm just telling you. So another one. So in my top 5 is Jack Johnson, and then I put the honorable Prophet Elijah Muhammad. That's interesting. When I said the honorable Prophet Elijah Muhammad, my screen went black. You can't make this stuff up. Anyways, I'm not even live streaming, but so his influence, without the Elijah Muhammad, without, you know, his book Message to the Black Man, which I believe every Black man should read. Without that, there'll be no Malcolm X, there'll be no Louis Farrakhan, there'll be no Muhammad Ali. Without his movement, you know, with the Nation of Islam in America, particularly in Black America, bringing that sector to Black America, that has been very, like, almost like just real. People don't realize how life changing that was for America, because this is the only group of people in terms of the NOI, the FOI, you know what I'm saying, spearheaded by Elijah Muhammad, right? Where he says he received a message from God, right? From his trips. You know, if you do his just look at his biography, without him, there'll be no Malcolm X, none of these people, Khalid Muhammad, all these people that you look up to. without Elijah Muhammad, that's why I believe we're talking about the most influential Black Americans. I believe Elijah Muhammad has to be in the top 5, because without him, like I'm talking about, I haven't seen a group of Black people just in unison with like that much discipline, that much progress. The NOI has literally produced Black people's best leaders. You know what I mean? So this is, he's very, very influential in my list. So that's why he's in my top 5, right? So we already said Jack Johnson. We said Prophet Muhammad, and let's see. Hopefully, yeah, that was weird. I said my screen went black when I said Elijah Muhammad. That's crazy. Anyway, this is weird. Okay, all right. So now Tupac. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, because I'm not gonna say, because you could obviously, whoever created hip hop, but there's just too much division over who created hip hop. So everybody's trying to say, no, he did. So I'm gonna leave that conversation alone. But I will tell you, obviously, Tupac, what he stood for, his messages, and not only to Black America, his music really brought people of all races together, and he had way too much influence for the powers that may be. This is why I believe he was targeted. This is like when you have musicians, he was on the level of, when we're talking about John Lennon, when we're talking about he had too much influence. He had too much influence over the young minds at that time. And yeah, he died at age 25. So man, he had his influence. I'm talking about his music was very powerful, the messages. And on top of that, when you look at, people like to say, oh, well, he was a fake thug, and what people don't realize, the stuff that he's done, there are things that he has done as a Black man that most Black men would never think of doing. When he saw a fellow Black man being abused by off-duty cops, or I don't know if they was wearing uniform, he saw that, and he took his pistol out and went to firing on these people. And they brought it to court, and he was found not guilty. And if you see the video, he's literally looking at them cops. He went to firing on them cops, and he was looking. The cops was in the courtroom looking at him, and he's just giving them just a death stare. Pac is just giving them y'all know y'all was doing dirt. Basically, most Black men are not that brave to start firing on some cops when they doing wrong. And he was one of the so he was really, to me, his influence and his messages in his songs, even in his people, want to talk about the other stuff. One of my favorite hip hop albums of all time, my top 5, is Machiavelli, the Machiavelli album, the posthumous album that was released after his death. That's in my top 5. That is a very influential album. When you talk about tracks like Blasphemy, Hail Mary, right? These are one of the To Live and Die in LA, I think, was in the album. This is a very powerful album, very powerful music. He made so much music, like his work ethic, especially towards the end of his life. When you look at his speeches, how he was talking, to say, look, we don't got time. You know what I mean? So he was really not only that, a prophet, he was also a prophet as well. So this was he was very very powerful, very influential. Without Tupac, a lot of the way rappers carry themselves, without Tupac, there would have been none of that. You know what I mean? No 50 Cent, you know what I'm saying? No Eminem, like his influence, really, he has become immortalized. He has become, I'm talking about when we talk about being immortalized, especially him dying at 25, he literally becomes now, he's the ultimate martyr. You know what I mean? Martyr figure in the hip hop community. So that's 3 I put. Now we'll go to the last 2. So Malcolm X, right? So like I already said, I didn't want to kind of put Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad on the same list because they're kind of from the same sector. And but obviously Malcolm X is his influence. It's just, we're talking about worldwide. Do you know how many people that Malcolm X brought to the Nation of Islam, bro? I'm talking about, that was Elijah Muhammad's top lieutenant, really. Because we talking about without Malcolm. Do you know the amount of people, especially black men, that became part of the Nation of Islam, or even, I'm talking about even worldwide, people that joined the religion because of Malcolm X. He really needs a statue or something, some next to the Mecca or something. Because without Malcolm X, there wouldn't be a whole lot of people in. I'm talking about, I believe this. He is very directly correlated to the boom. I think he's part of the boom in of basically the numbers, when we talk about the amount of people that are part of who claim Islam as their religion. You know what I mean? He's very. I'm talking. And his speeches, I still listen to Malcolm X's speeches to this day, dog. Like his speeches were on point. No doubt about it. Very on point. And that's another thing. And I always say this because people keep talking about, Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, and I don't like doing the comparison, but I'll say this. Malcolm X, like his life was targeted first. He got shot first. He died first for a reason. Like they were like FBI was on his ass. Like I'm talking about they couldn't find no dirt on this dude because all of the stuff that he did, he already spent prison time for, and that's where he found the Nation of Islam. So it's interesting. His story is so interesting, man. It's very powerful. It's very powerful. Now, also, let me add to another honorable mentions. And people won't agree with this honorable mentions. O.J. Simpson. I don't know if I didn't mention. So O.J. Simpson. Without O.J. Simpson is you can't tell the American story, especially of the entertainment industry, without O.J. Simpson. Bottom line. Another honorable mention, Dave Chappelle. Let me list off some black comedians, very influential. Richard Pryor, Paul Mooney. I'm talking about influence. What's that? Red Fox, one of the first. I'm talking about his comedy, one of the first dirty stuff that was underground, brought it to mainstream. Very influential. Very, 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 very influential. James Brown, Michael Jackson, these guys, obviously very influential. But like I said, this is going to be my top 5, right? So also in my top 5, and I kind of gave you a hint since I mentioned O.J. Simpson, Johnny Cochran, the epitome of American excellence. And really, he needs to be, when we talk about, forget black excellence, he is the American standard. He is American's creation. And what's beautiful about him, what's beautiful about Johnny Cochran, and why I put him as top 5 black Americans of all time, it's interesting how after the OJ case, right, where he basically did the impossible, and I think because of how he finessed that case, because white people still have not gone over that. You know that, right? Out of all, they still hold that shit against us. You know that, right? Like people wonder why. Damn, you still see some black men going to court and they be going through it. Guys, we're still paying for that OJ thing. I hope you guys know that. Like I be trying to tell you, we're still paying for that, and that's what I'm talking about. Influential. When you look at his record, when you look at Johnny Cochran's record, he's literally one of the greatest American attorneys of all time. Especially in the entertainment industry, the celebrities he done got off, the people that he got off, his winning record, he's literally one of the greatest American stories. He really should have a movie dedicated to Johnny Cochran. And really when you look at, people believe that in 2000, people think he was killed because he was actually preparing a case for economic reparations for black Americans. And, surprise, surprise, he dies. You know what I mean? So, and I believe if he was able to get that together, he would have won that case. And what people don't understand is when it comes to that, the reason why I don't ever think black Americans are going to get reparations is because it would devalue the American dollar. And then on top of that, do you know how much money like the American government really owes black Americans? Think how much money like do you know how much money the NBA owes Michael Jordan really? If you look at what he did for the game, do you know how much money like the NBA owes Michael Jordan money? This is why I don't agree with when they said LeBron James in the top 5. Nah. Not over MJ. So when you look at that, I'm pretty sure Johnny Cochran would have found a way because his brilliance, really, if you look at his brilliance, how he was able to persuade the jury. People just think, because it was black juries, they already had an agenda. And yes, they obviously they were biased, but that's how he really exposed how the American court system works. Because I believe before the OJ case, I think white people really believed that the court is like a fair and just system. I really believe I think it took that case. Because they should have never put the case on TV. That was because they wanted to make an example out of OJ because of the powers that be that was connected to Nicole. And on top of that, they wanted to punish their favorite pet Negro who at the time was O.J. Simpson. That's why I said honorable mention O.J. Simpson, because he was the most loved man in America at one point. It was so when you look at that, I think before that, I believe, this is my belief, I believe white people before that case, I don't think they would have ever really thought that there's nothing like I believe they thought the justice system was flawless until Johnnie Cochran, even though Johnnie Cochran was racking up victories before that, already made a name for himself. He really put himself, because it kind of, yeah, it raised his stock, but really it kind of lowered it at the same time in the predominant society's eyes, because in their mind, how could you go to work for this killer, basically, so much so that they still call O.J. Simpson a killer to this day, even though he was proven innocent in the court of law. That's why when we talk about American excellence and you look at his accomplishments, you look at Johnnie Cochran, how he did it the American way. And when you bring up Johnnie Cochran's name, white people refuse to give him the credit that he deserves. This is why I put him in my top 5. This is why, if I see when I see people moving a goalpost to not give you the credit that you deserve, then I'm like, you did something. I'm talking about, like, with it, because of that case, Ninjas is still suffering from it till this day, in my opinion. So you got to be in my top 5 in terms of influence. This is why, when I was saying earlier, this is why I said, there wouldn't be a Malcolm X without Elijah Muhammad. This is why I give more of the credit to Elijah Muhammad, because without him, there'll be none of that. So what I'm saying, Johnnie Cochran doesn't realize, and on top of that, exposing the corruption within the LAPD, and also the head detective of the case, and how LAPD usually do shit. Planning evidence, right? Getting greedy on a case, tampering with evidence, releasing stuff that the head detective has said about black people and stuff like that. This is why, and Johnnie Cochran did a really great job, animating himself. He literally portrayed everything that they complain about what Johnnie Cochran did to get OJ off is literally, this is how the American lawyers, this is how they do things. And he's really an American icon that we really should be lifting up like this, especially in the black community. But for some reason, when we talk about black excellence, we don't want to mention Johnnie Cochran just because he was connected to the OJ case. And I'm like, no, this is how things work in America. But for some reason, they don't. The predominant society does not want to take that L in terms of that particular case, which I don't understand why. The average normie just be saying, oh, OJ did it. No, if you believe the American justice system is the best in the world, they didn't cheat the case. They did what you're supposed to do. He did what he was supposed to do: defend his client, prove. Was it beyond reasonable doubt? There was a lot of doubt around this, especially the way the people that handled the case, and they exposed it. That's what you're supposed to do. And on top of that, when you look at the people connected to the case, when I talk about the rise of the Kardashians, without that, it's when we talk that case, it's because they should have never put it on TV. Yeah, I don't even think like the advent of reality TV wasn't really. That was really the start of everything. And I believe the way Johnnie Cochran worked, the way he did his thing in the courtroom was very influential. I believe a lot of lawyers look at that low key and they're like, let me take note of how very influential, very important. He needs to get more credit.